Welcome everyone. Today is September 12th, 2024. It's 5:15 p.m. and I'm going to call with a quorum of members present, infrastructure and facilities meeting to order. With that, the agenda is going to get mixed up quite a bit here tonight, I think. So we're going to bring agenda item number 8 to the front and talk about that one first. And that is discussion and possible action approving temporary lease agreement with Woodson YMCA and Foundation Inc., Yankee Park, and Ann Jacobson.
There's a brief staff report in the packet. This is because recently we sold the end of the portion of the vacated Franklin Street right-of-way to the Y for their upcoming expansion project, and they had a permanent lease agreement with us for the use of their child care facility there on the west end of Franklin Street. Since the entire area that was being leased to them was contained within the property that we just sold to them, that lease was terminated, but now they need to move their child care facility somewhere else temporarily while they stage their temporary construction project just south of the landing there. So they needed a minimum, I think, of 860 or 70 square feet to meet childcare regulations, and we worked with Dave Hempfner. I think there's a map attached to the short lease showing 1,960 square feet we got for them without encumbering any access or sidewalks or the fountain or anything. That was the location where they wanted it. It will be temporary. They expect not before October 1st, finished in the spring, could be March, but we ended it in May. They think they're very comfortable with that timeline, so it will be temporary, but we wanted something in writing. They paid us about $2,900 a year under the old lease. They proposed in talking to Mr. Bailey that they give us $1 for consideration and that we not charge them a monthly lease payment for the temporary lease, since they are providing a critical service to our community through child care services, and it is temporary for their construction expansion. So we're recommending approval tonight of their temporary lease to move their child care facilities during their construction. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Alder Neal.
I would move to approve the request.
Okay, I got a motion to
I'll second.
Motion from Neal, second from Larson. Any further discussion? See none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank
Aye.
you.
Opposed? No one's opposed. All right, and I'm going to pull one more agenda item up. Agenda item number 6. Just so we can get him out of here. Discussion and possible action on development agreement with STS Investment LLC west of Birchwood Drive and west of Old Coach Road. This was recommended to come back to us from full council. I know Sid showed up kind of near the end of our last meeting, so I wanted to give him time to say what he wants to say, and I'll invite him to the mic.
Hi there, I'm Sid. In the past, it has always been the lift stations fees, the park fees be paid when the property itself is sold. So each time, what I've always done before is I sell a property, I pay those items. Problem that I have is doing it the way that was set up is I've got a lot of expense into the property. There's no expense to the city for having it there other than you're collecting originally about $50 for that parcel of land, that 1.5 acre of land. And then as soon as it turns over into the city, I get charged $1,000 a year property tax on it. And the property tax is only there because I put $30,000, $40,000 into that parcel to put sewer and water, gas, electric, and everything else. So by putting that off, it's not such a burden to myself or to any other developer that way. And it's not like the land's going anywhere, going to sneak it away from the city for expenses.
Okay, thank you. Alan?
Sure.
Any
So-
background?
Yeah, so, and I would say in the past, there hasn't been a lot of developers agreements with subdivisions lately. I think in the past that statement is true that we would, some of those fees would be collected later. We did change that with the latest edition of Greenwood Hills that just went in. Those fees were paid ahead of time, so we've kind of shifted that in these last couple developers agreements. And kind of what the reasoning behind that is just the bookkeeping and the tracking of those. We've had, if this lot doesn't sell for 3, 5, 10 years, there's really not a great way to track that other than with Lori. Catching it when it comes through on an assessment letter or a hearing letter, a checking letter later. So it was just, and that's kind of hit or miss, to be honest with you. And it was just a bookkeeping thing to try and catch all those properties. And it's not the fees are, every fee is important, I guess, but just so the committee the parkland dedication fees were $1,600. And the fees for the booster station and the lift station are $2,800. So you'd have $2,800, $1,600 for the 4 lots. So we get an idea of what kind of fees we're talking about. So I guess the precedence was kind of set with the Greenwood, and then we just followed it through to this one. So you were treated kind of equally with the other subdivision that we put in. We weren't picking on you, Sid, so just so you know.
I just go back 35 years doing this. It was the first subdivision that I did in the city.
Yep.
So I've had the experiences from the past, and that's where I'm coming from.
Yep.
Okay, and that's, if that was something we wanted to undo or go back to the old ways, that would come through this committee, right?
Yeah, you can make the recommendation however you want. We would just amend because the developers agreement did not, I think it was brought back from council, correct? So we would just bring the amended, whatever you guys recommend, we would bring that amended back through council.
Alder Neal?
Thank you. So is this particularly a unique situation from anything else that's similar, or is this a new precedent-setting thing that we might be entertaining here? I'm not close enough to this to understand. Is it unique, or are we doing something out of turn?
Well, like Sid said, we used to do it when every lot would come in, say you get 100 subdivision lot or whatever, 50, every time one of those lots was sold, a letter would come through. I think we call it a checking letter. Is that the way it is, Lori? Or a property valuation. And then we would have to report to the clerk that there is a lift station fee, so then that fee would be paid at the time the lot was sold, which becomes a little bit of a tracking nightmare on our end. But that's the way it used to be done. So when we came, there hasn't really been a subdivision in the last several years. So when the developers agreement came through for the Green Vistas, the new one up there, we said, well, let's change that to bring these fees up front. And that was kind of a change. So now when this subdivision came through, it's only 4 lots, but we said, let's do it the same way. Let's keep those fees due up front. I have seen some of them in the past were written, if the lots don't sell within 5 years, the fees are due at the end of 5 years. It's a little bit of a less of a tracking nightmare, but somebody still has to catch that in 5 years. Somebody has to send Sid a bill. So, or the developer a bill. So, you could go back to that, or, you could say if the lots don't sell within 5 years, I have seen that in some past ones, that those fees are due at the end of that 5 years.
Go ahead.
Is this something, since there's dollars attached to it, that would need to go through like another committee, like finance or something, to say yes or no? It's a question of, potential revenue, whether it's deferred or upfront. But, are we the right place to be making that determination, or are we the only place to make that determination?
It's a good question. I think it could go through finance too. Either way, it's going to go through the full council, I guess.
Right. I think, the developer's agreement, just because it's a subdivision, it came here, right? And so this is just really whether the committee wants to recommend having these paid up front or, paid as the lots sell, right? Which is just something we have to track. It's not like special assessments where, those are tracked automatically, like when somebody purchases a home, there's a letter, and stuff. This is something we have to track in-house because this is not a special assessment, it's just a fee, it's a charge, yeah. So,
And yet others have gone ahead and paid upfront fee rather than a deferred.
the only one is Green Vistas, and so that was just recently too. And we do have another subdivision that's looking to come in, we haven't seen the final plat yet, but that's Timber Creek, I think.
So would Green Vistas have, some sort of, need for redress of their upfront, or have they already gotten far enough along in selling properties or?
Those fees have already been paid.
Yeah.
Then that developer's agreement's
Yeah.
already signed.
Well, I
so-
assume so, but,
Yep.
I mean, now, are they gonna be like, well, gee, we paid but didn't have to,
Right.
I don't mean to cause trouble here, I'm just kind of
No,
like.
but this is just really how the developer's agreement is written right now, right? So it's really up to the committee whether you want to change it, because every developer's agreement, like Alan said, they've been written different ways, so.
Okay.
From a tracking standpoint, just from a staff standpoint, we'd prefer not to have to track these, but,
Okay.
yep.
Well, I don't know if it's okay, I would make a motion to approve at this point, but if I could amend this to also ensure that it goes along to finance, for them too. I mean, it's money, so seems to me they should look at it before it comes to council.
So your motion is to
Approve the
it
request.
with it up front?
And also to make sure it moves along to finance.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll second
Larson.
that motion,
Okay.
but I would
Or a
like to
second.
ask Alder Martins if this is something that he feels that the Finance Committee should look into.
So I've been thinking about this because I'm trying to think, if there's already a monetary amount attached to this contract. We're not changing the monetary amounts at all, but the way in which we're going to collect them. So it makes me wonder if it's something that needs to go through finance or not, because the amount of the money is not changing. I don't know. I guess that would be it's more of a philosophical discussion than anything else. I mean, if we want to, if you want finance to bless it, well, we can certainly take it through finance. But I'm not quite certain if it needs to go through finance because a dollar amount has already been attached to this contract or this developer's agreement.
Alder Watson?
So just to clarify, Alder Neal, you want the fees to be collected now or later? I guess I'm just not sure.
I'm a fence sitter on that issue. I just don't know that we're the right people to be determining that. So, just to move it along, I'm moving to approve the request.
To
But
delay the,
I'd like to see it the request to delay, to not pick up,
To delay
to not
the-
upfront fee. But then maybe move it, to finance before it comes to council, because I think council might be scratching its head too about it.
So have finance make the decision if they should be collected now or later?
Yeah,
or
that's,
confirm,
yeah,
I would assume.
yeah.
I guess I just am hesitant to venture away from a process that it seems like staff wants to implement to just streamline process. I mean, I think maybe, I guess if every development agreement's different, or going forward, I mean, consistency is sort of nice. And, I mean, if we haven't had subdivisions like this in like 30 years or 20 years, having a new process go into effect isn't something that I see as being a bad thing. I think it's making it more efficient. So I'm not sure if delaying the collection is great, unless there's like undue financial hardship. Then maybe that can be just a decision made by, developer by developer. So that's my opinion, I guess.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second to delay the payment until the lots are sold and send to finance to have it be blessed. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay?
No. That passes 3-2. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 1. Consent agenda. And I have had a request to pull the snow and ice removal fees, I believe, from the consent agenda. So any discussion on the consent agenda?
I would move to approve the consent agenda.
All right, I have a motion to approve the consent agenda from Alder Watson, seconded by Neil. Any further discussion? See none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. We'll move on to agenda item number 1, action on authorizing downtown snow ice removal. Alder Neil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In looking at the list of requested routes, if you will, one thing that came to mind was Second Street, like between Washington and Forest, as well as the walk in front of the Imaginarium and Home Furniture. I don't know if those are separately contracted or whatnot, but as far as Second Street, city sidewalk, connecting destinations, downtown destinations from parking area and such. So it seems to me that it might be something we want to add to the list.
I was also looking at the list and thinking ahead even to next year or 2 years from now with that other street, Third Street getting extended there. So, yeah, any further discussion? Alder Watson?
So would that be something we should amend, or would that come up when the sidewalks come up?
Well, I think too, like, when we do this, right, this is contracted out work, right? So the businesses pay this at the end of the year. And so I guess we could add those in, but, we'd want to know who is going to pay for that work, and are they amenable to paying for that work, or are they going to take care of it themselves?
Right, because,
Yeah.
the Second Street
Yep.
strip there, that'd be what was.
Right,
And the Imaginarium is, up to Forest.
right,
So, yeah.
yeah. So we could reach out to them and find out exactly how that would,
I would move to approve the request as presented and instruct staff to look into adding, if necessary, that stretch.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve and direction to staff to look at Second Street and Third Street whenever that comes around there.
I'll
Right.
second.
All right, I got a second from Alder Larson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes 5-0. Now we will move on to agenda item number 2. Presentation by City of Schofield and MSA regarding the Eau Claire River Pedestrian Trail and Bridge. So, Alan, you want to? No? Or these guys can just go? Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, I mean, it was in your packet, so we have a presentation to MSA, and then Mark through it from Schofield is here to lead us through it.
Yes, well, I'm just going to kind of introduce it a little bit in the sense that back in 2004, 5, 6, Dave Mack had started the Wausau Bike and Ped Committee through the MPO, and we sat on that committee and we tried to come up with routes within this region that kind of made some decent connectivity, and we put a lot of thought into it, and over the years, a lot of these sections of trail have gotten constructed already, making these, key locations, connections from one jurisdiction to the next. And some of the pinch points are the river crossings throughout this whole area, as you know, even with streets like Bridge Street and then the other one over here. So with trails, it's kind of similar. So we had been planning for a long time at the MPO, trying to make off-street trails and connections through Schofield and Rothschild, Cronewetter. And we've been looking at this area to make a connection with the city of Wausau, Weston, and Schofield, a strategic location that kind of gets bike pedestrian traffic off of Grand Avenue. We had considered, and there's still some discussions of working with the Wausau Airport, but the airport really doesn't like any kind of pedestrian traffic up along the fence, and trying to figure out how to buy right away in certain areas to put it maybe in different locations along Grand Avenue. But the most common sense route that we kind of came up with, because of certain landowners kind of fell into play in this, and they're willing partners at this point in time to allow us to construct a bridge that parallels what used to be Canadian National Railroad, now Foxy Watco, up through Schofield. And we've, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've been kind of working on trails coming up along the Canadian National Railroad from Rothschild and connecting with the pedestrian bridge that goes across the Wisconsin River south of Domtar. And so now we have trail systems that kind of come north, almost as far to the north side of Schofield up to the Eau Claire River. And it kind of dead ends. And we kind of figured, well, if people start using it, and we have our industrial park kind of bumps up against it in that area, and people are using those trail systems in there. So how do we get those people and make that connection into Wausau and Weston? And so we're looking for funding ideas, and I talked to the railroad a while ago, and they says, well, if you have a study, maybe we can kind of work together, and they'd be willing partners to make this connection underneath the railroad trestle versus establishing a crossing to go across the railroad. So I'd say in 2022, we applied for TAP funding, and we received funding for a study to make this trail connection and do a feasibility study and find out what impacts we'd have, and trying to come up with some costs for the infrastructure that we need to install in this to make this connection. And with that, we did selection and hired MSA to complete the study for us, and they have some of the results for us through that study. So I guess if Dan would be willing to go through his little slides and
Thank you, Mark.
bring you guys up to speed. But thank you guys again for taking time out to listen to our presentation.
All right, so as Mark had indicated, we scoped this project out with the DOT, and the scope involved 3 different alternatives. The first alternative is a bridge on the east side of the existing railroad bridge. Second alternative is a bridge on the west side of the existing railroad bridge. And then there's, of course, the no-build alternative. What happens in the long run if we continue to utilize Grand Ave? Is there going to be more incidents that happen along that route and more dangerous situations that we put people in along that route? TJ, go to the next slide. So in this presentation, just kind of a broad, Mark kind of gave a good introduction and kind of a project planning overview. Really the purpose and need is to not only improve the safety along this corridor, but also to provide linkage to the other communities in the area. As Mark has indicated, City of Schofield's investing on a bridge over Business 51 that's going to be constructed in the next year here or so. And so they're bringing their trail and infrastructure near this spot for not only access to the river, but access to City of Schofield property that's adjacent to the river. We reviewed community planning documents. We looked at a bunch of different plans. We looked at the existing site conditions and environmental review, the trail design for each of the different alternatives, what structures needed to be in place for each of the alternatives, construction access, maintenance, emergency and safety access, what utilities were going to be impacted, railroad impacts, and then we also included a public involvement process with this study. Alternatives 1 and 2 had large cost comparisons and in addition to the no-build cost as well. Proposed bike map routing was included, a possible project schedule, funding sources, and then we'll wrap it up with any comments and questions you may have. Next slide. So the study corridor basically is from the end of Kent Street by the recreational complex all the way over to Camp Phillips Road. and as well as the end of Grossman Drive. So that's what the corridor that the study looked at. Primarily at the end of Kent Street to Moret Lane, where there's a residential driveway and a driveway to Camp Sturtevant, was kind of the limits on the east end of the project. Next slide, TJ. So safety issues is a lot of crashes. It's been documented with the MPO report and other like City of Wausau surveys, how dangerous this network or area along Grand Ave is. And to the point where I think there was 47 comments in the last survey that the City of Wausau did that said that they don't feel comfortable going down that section of road right now. So it's the need to link the systems, improve community quality of life. It's stressful with a bunch of driveways and traffic going at high speeds right next to you. Sharrows are a short-term solution. It gets the commuter bikes where they need to go, but I would have a hard time telling a family friend that, hey, take your kids down to the Imaginarium and use Grand Ave as the main corridor to get there. So there's a scare factor and stress factor that goes along with traffic that close to you. Increasing the tourism. So one of the things that Central Wisconsin prides themselves on is the ability to attract people for recreation purposes, especially like with the whitewater kayak course. Trying to get people to downtown is important. Increasing bike routes that get people to and from downtown Wausau, and then providing just a good dedicated trail map that everybody feels comfortable with recommending to somebody from out of town, like, hey, use this route. This is the best, most efficient way to get from point A to B in the City of Wausau. Next slide. So in total, we reviewed probably around 10 different plans, anywhere from comprehensive outdoor rec plans to bike and ped plans specific, like the MPO plan. City of Schofield had 3 plans. City of Wausau had 4 plans. They actually had a River's Edge plan and a strategic plan that came into play and mentioned this area as a corridor to improve recreation. As Village of Weston had a few plans, the town of Weston had a comprehensive plan. Basically, with all these plans, all the communities are supportive of improving their recreational infrastructure for park and rec and trails. It seemed like some of the goals that were mentioned were provide friendly community infrastructure and transportation systems, dedicated bike facilities, provide transportation systems that support growth, recreation, inclusivity, and diversity. It'd be hard for somebody, I'd think, with a wheelchair to get up and down Grand Ave and feel comfortable navigating that corridor versus a recreational corridor where it might be easier for them to get through. MPO mentions that a lot of other routes along this stretch of road are undesirable because they're 40% longer for the users to use. There's another statement that says, in the River's Edge Trail, that they're looking to, extend facilities down Curling Way to the east Kent Street northern termini, as well as connect to the Conservancy that's down there. So a lot of support for this type of project and this infrastructure in this location. Next slide, TJ. So we're kind of given some snippets of what was in these plans. The first off is a level of stress map. This was level of stress high given by the MPO. There's also documented bike crashes from 2009 to 2014 that show the significant number of incidents along Business 51. There's ordinances that, like the City of Schofield has, that tells bikers to use the sidewalk because it's not convenient or safe for them to use the road. So there's even public documents that tell people not to bike on the road in this stretch of road. Go next slide, TJ. This is a City of Schofield comprehensive outdoor rec plan. This was kind of the essence of the scope, where they had planned as a community to identify the potential corridors and kind of looked at yellow box on there was what they anticipated as a study corridor initially with that comprehensive outdoor rec plan. The next one on the right side there is the City of Wausau River Edge plan. You can see item I is identified as a corridor to get people off of Prospect and down along the recreational complex. So you're bringing people to the northern end of Kent Street So from a city of Wausau or connection standpoint, it seemed to make logical sense to continue that corridor from the end of Kent Street to connect to the other communities. Next slide, TJ. Village of Weston has plans to eventually the Mountain Bay Trail. The DNR owns the Mountain Bay Trail pretty much up to X, and right now Watco owns the section that would be between Craft and County Highway X, and with no intentions of ever giving that section up because of continued use and storage of rail cars. So now we're looking at what is the alternate way to get people from Yellow Banks Park and the pedestrian facilities along Camp Phillips down to a potential trail connection at Camp Sturtevant. Weston did do some improvements to Northwestern. Once again, Northwestern does have some of the same safety issues that Grand Ave does, just on a smaller scale. Grand Ave sees 17 to 23,000 cars a day, whereas Northwestern only sees about 2,800 cars a day. But people fly on that road, and there's certainly a lot of blind hill that kind of catch people off guard biking along that stretch of road. Next slide, TJ. So part of the existing conditions analysis, we wanted to get an idea of, okay, what crashes have happened since the MPO crash study, what would be the trail routing, look at the environmental impacts, as well as looking at what's called hydrologic and hydraulic study. What is the river doing, and what do we have to do to mitigate any issues getting across the river? Next slide. So first off, crash data since 2014 to 2024, there still has been 24 crashes involving bicyclists and pedestrians, 14 bicyclists, 10 pedestrians. There has been minor injuries, 2 fatalities reported near intersections. 67% of the crashes occurred during daylight hours, 5 crashes wet, snowy. So you can kind of get an idea that, the bicyclists, it ranges all the way from young kids to older adults that are experiencing difficulty navigating this section of roadway. Next slide. Trail routing, so we met out there with Jamie Polly, Parks Director, as well as Mark Thuet, as well as the property owners. There's 3 main private property owners along this study area that we were working with to get on board with the location of the trail, in such that they were willing to sign letters of intent upon completion of the study to say that we are supportive of what you guys are doing. And if there was a land transfer or easement, we'd be supportive of that too. So trail alignment was marked out. It was GPS shot. The mapping that you have there is reflective of that GPS alignment. The flag points were collected, and then we also had significant coordination with the railroad, at least 3 meetings with the railroad. They were invited to our initial local officials meeting where we had about 62 people invited between the different communities to provide initial input on it, as well as the DOT. Railroad was invited to that, and then we had specific design discussion meetings of where is the best location across your tracks, what impacts are improvements going to have on your tracks, and how can we mitigate some of those to gain public access. Next slide. Wetland delineations, you're down by a river, there are wet locations. Wetlands add cost to a project. Wetlands require boardwalk because they're not going to let you fill it for actual solid trail surface. So we did a total delineation of the area that would be impacted by the trail and came up with 21 different wetlands in our trail. We can safely say routes around most of those. So there is some temporary construction access that impacts them with wetland matting, but for the most part, we're avoiding wetlands to the greatest extent possible. Next slide, TJ. So H&H study is short for hydrologic and hydraulic study. We did this with a sonar mite. We floated that little instrumentation on the river, created cross sections, did HEC-RAS modeling, and found out that alternative 2 really creates some implications with the raised trail. So the alternative 2, because of where it's located, is a shorter channel crossing because it's parallel right with and next to the bridge. The railroad bridge. But what we found is that the raised structures in the floodplain created a rise in elevation, and with any sort of permitting with this project, we have to prove to the Army Corps of Engineers that we're not raising the floodwaters or backwaters of this project more than 1/100 of a foot. So Alternative 1 didn't create any backwater, but alternative 2, because the railroad bridge kind of creates a restriction and then it widens out, that actually creates a small backwater when modeled. So alternative 2 also had implications with the railroad. Because of its proximity to the railroad bridge and the railroad bridge having a spread footing foundation, so they said that their bridge foundation was old logs. So it's an old log mat under each of those. And they felt with the vibration for piling and our work doing fill for causeway work and getting out there would jeopardize their structure, and they didn't. They weren't in agreement with the alternative 2 layout because of that, and they would want us to be further away than where we were located for positioning the bridge. So a combination of those two things, as well as the additional flagging costs, the impacts of shutting the railroad down, created some issues with the cost on the project, and that's why you'll find when we get to the cost component that alternative 2 ultimately became a higher cost because of those things. Next slide, TJ. Trail design, this is, the DOT expects all these trail designs to meet their facility requirements because they're funding this study. So it has to meet American with Disabilities Act, it has to meet width requirements, so we're looking at a clear width of a trail of 16 feet. The actually gravel shoulder, there'd be a 10-foot wide paved trail, 2-foot gravel shoulders on each side, and then a clear width between the trees of 16 feet. With also meeting grade requirements. So one of the things that we did is modeled this trail with the LiDAR, Marathon County LiDAR mapping, and kind of came up with some rough cuts that were going to be needed to route the trail to meet all the grade requirements. Bridge had to be designed with the state bridge parameters, which is emergency vehicle loading. So we had to put a 20,000 pound load on this bridge, which would simulate an ambulance loading when we designed the bridge. So all that's taken into account with the cost estimate and design the way we set up the cost estimate. Next slide, TJ. So we talked about alternative 1 really is a 658-foot bridge crossing from basically the end of Grossman over to what's NWA Holdings, which is a property owned by Gary Gurant. And then alternative 2 is primarily on public property, connecting the city of Wausau and the city of Schofield properties. Because the actual span itself is a 3-span, but it's only 845 feet with the raised boardwalk section. So actually, in order to get a trail underneath it, we'd have to do a little curly Q, and we have an elevation or grade separation between the trail to get access up to it, get across, and then back down. So. And then we also identified a Wausau connector. So we're not building a bridge to nowhere, trying to connect the city of Wausau with the sports complex, and then the River Conservancy there, and then the Weston connector, which would be from the north termini of the bridge to Camp Sturtevant. Next slide, TJ. And this gives you that visual that you have in your handout. If you need to read anything, I guess look at your handout. Kind of shows the alignment of the bridge, how it'd be routed down some of the steeper banks of the river there. You can kind of see on the north end there's a little curly Q to meet the grade requirements. It goes over through town of Weston, and Dan Higginbotham's property was another major property owner along this route. And then the purple, so the orange is the Weston connector, the purple is the City of Wausau connector. The City of Wausau connector is about a mile of trail. The Weston connector is about a half mile of trail. And then the City of Schofield connector is about a quarter mile of trail. Next slide, TJ. This gives you a layout of alternative 2, the candy cane looking line work at the north end and south end of the bridge indicate it's a raised trail, so it would be built above the floodplain. And then it shows you kind of the span lengths on that. The Weston connectors would be shaped just a little bit differently with the bridge on that side. As you get off the bridge and come down that raised trail, you'd still have to get underneath the railroad truss. And then the City of Wausau section of trail. Next slide. So real estate needs, as I indicated, we do have private owners on this, and they're on board with the project. The DOT is going to make communities buy the section of property that the bridge lands on. So that's why fee is actually buying the property outright. And there's about 0.2 acres of identified property that would have to be bought outright to land the bridge. The rest of it, the DOT would allow it to be on what's called permanent limited easement, where you'd have rights to operate and maintain a trail on private property. However, you wouldn't own the land. And then TLE stands for temporary limited easement, which means that over the duration of the project, we're expecting grading to go onto private property, but it's going to revert to private property when all's said and done. Wetland disturbance, like I said, both options we minimized wetland disturbance. The temporary disturbance is a result of access and wetland matting that would be necessary. Next slide, TJ. Structures. So structures were a big component of this for connectivity. We have the main bridges, which we already discussed, but another main connector is the Northwest Stream Crossing, and there's a picture kind of centered up on the screen. That's about a 50-foot long bridge that would have to get us over to the pedestrian bridge. So that would be a structure that they would have to build in order to gain access to get what's called a box culvert or a railroad underpass. We did box culvert design. Another concern of the railroad was the fact that they didn't want pedestrians wandering on their property underneath their bridge just haphazardly. So we have box culverts basically taking you almost to the edge of their property. They didn't want kids and people climbing up their embankments down there. So geotechnical explorations are going to be a feat on their own. For each of these structures, we're going to need access prior to design, and which means a contractor is going to have to come in and get temporary access so that we can drill for the piling and figure out what geotech analysis needs to be done. So there'll be some clearing and construction before the actual construction starts. There's a few minor retaining walls along the bridge structure. The railroad has some pretty steep embankments that we're going to have to combat, especially on the northeast side of the structure. And then just the overall construction duration, is going to be a few years by the time you get the geotech analysis, and so it's several years out on that. Next slide. So construction access, maintenance, emergency, and safety access. We have a visual of where we're anticipating construction access, but essentially we're going to need area, TLE on the property where the bridge lands in order to stage that big of a structure. The railroad, it will require that they do their own crossings. So for temporary access, they're going to want to build their own crossing across the tracks, the spur tracks there. The trail bridge amenities so we got to get ambulance across, and it has to be able to have access for that. Design phase, there's going to need to be some cost sharing agreements that are going to be discussed with communities for any sort of ongoing maintenance of the structure. And then a question came up on whether or not lighting should be added to the scope for safety or not. In the initial meeting, it was decided that lighting wasn't relevant at this time. There was also some concerns that lighting may cause issues with the wildlife out there, and there was some discussion on whether or not it'd be safety, but there is an allowance in the overall cost estimate of about $500,000 to continue a discussion on lighting and if it would be included with the bridge or not. So that's all something that can be decided as the project moves forward. Next slide. This shows the construction access diagram. The green coming from Northwestern is a primary access road that the railroad wanted. You can see the crossing on that access road. It looked like it was a road previously for access to that section of property. There's some purple, which is all the wetland matting that would have to get installed. And then there's yellow, which is temporary bridges for the contractor to get across to do what they need to do with the piers or the box culverts going under the railroad. Next slide. Utilities didn't really have much concern. There's not much for utilities out there. It's a pretty rural space in that opinion. There's one power line crossing, but for the most part, utilities are not impacted as much by it. The railroad is going to make us go through what's called the OCR process, which is the Office of Commissioner of Railroads for a public crossing. So there would have to be a petition to OCR and go through that process to get access. Flagging is going to be required for either option. However, option 1, the flagging is significantly reduced because the bridge veers away from the railroad, and once a crane, gets out of the reach of the railroad, you don't need railroad flagging anymore. The public involvement process, the DOT asked that we have a public involvement meeting. We had it at Marathon Park on July 18th. We had about 21 people. There were several comments on the improvements that this project would make to the area. Several people commented we moved here to see these types of improvements and like living in this area because of the biking and recreation facilities. But then there was a couple opposing thoughts on cost, environmental impacts, and just this project being potentially a lower priority for communities than other projects. WSDOT, like I said, is a major part of this, kind of driving. They're paying for the study, so they're reviewing all the content that we put in here. But eventually they're supportive of this, improving the transportation corridor along Business 51. Next slide, TJ. So what do our cost estimates all include? In the final report, there's going to be detailed cost estimates, but in your packets and handouts, I gave you snippets of kind of the summary pages in the cost estimate. The cost estimates have general costs that are kind of inclusive of the entire project, like mobilization, bonds, insurance, flagging, but then also have actual construction costs for materials, labor, equipment. It has contingency on it for all the unknowns. It has geotechnical investigation, site constraints, geology and wetland, takes those into account. Design engineering, construction engineering, there's going to be some legal and administrative reviews that are going to have to take place. There's going to be a WSDOT review if you go through WSDOT TAP funding for this, or an STP urban type funding for this. And then real estate costs are included in there, as well as inflation, since this project is going to be several years down the road, up to 5 years down the road before it's actually constructed. Next slide. So alternative 1 sums up to about 19.2 million. Alternative 2 goes about 22 million. Explained a little bit of the differences. This is a summary table showing, costs between City of Schofield, City of Wausau, and the town of Weston and Village of Weston are kind of lumped into one category because it benefits both the town and village. You can kind of see the trail splits. So the trail was split based on the length of trail in each municipality. The structure is because there's mutual benefit between the communities to make these connections, was split in thirds between the 3 jurisdictions. So all the structure costs are split into thirds. The City of Schofield has a connector underneath the railroad or a box culvert on their side that was all 100% their cost because it only provides access to their property on the south side of the railroad. So that southern box culvert was 100% City of Schofield cost. Next slide, TJ. So breaking it up into phases, obviously the most important corridor is the north-south corridor or reroute of Bike Route 9. And so I prioritize that as phase 1. We can't have a trail to nowhere, so at least this would connect Grossman Drive to the recreational complex and provide that connectivity to the City of Wausau, City of Schofield. Felt like this was kind of the main driver behind the project and that it needed to be looked at first. You can see with an 80-20 split, so let's say all TAP projects are a 20% municipality cost and 80% federal or state cost. City of Wausau would be, for this first phase, because of the length of trail being almost a mile, you'd be looking at about 1.9 million in municipality cost, as well as the total cost for the city would be close to $10 million when all said and done. It wouldn't be 10 million with the TAP program. That would hopefully pay for about 7 million of that cost. So, next slide, TJ. Phase 2 focuses primarily on the connection between Weston and the north end of the bridge. This would be designated as Weston's responsibility. So once again, just identifying that length of trail by the cost and what they could receive in TAP funds, put in an application for it. Next slide, TJ. Next one would be the City of Schofield Public Land Connector. As I indicated, there's public land that the city owns on the west side of the railroad bridge that they would like to try to gain access to as a part of this project as well. And so that would be 100% their cost, and it's a little lower on the phasing than the other two. Next slide, TJ. So when all said and done, Route 9, we're looking at taking away from Grand Ave and the connecting streets and routing it on the newly established corridor all the way from Rothschild, where Volkman Street on the south end is. As Mark had indicated, they're getting a bridge over Business 51 across Ross, and it would go up through the Eau Claire River segment. But then also routing Route 15 off of Northwestern and utilizing Route 15 to get over to the bridge and up to Wausau as well. And it could be a continuation of, the Mountain Bay Trail temporarily until that track is no longer necessary. Next slide, TJ. So a possible schedule, if we're planning on wrapping up the study, this is the last phase of the study, is to present the results of the study to each of the communities. And then we have upcoming TAP cycle in 2025. Engineering, railroad coordination, real estate would take about 3 years. So from 2026, by the time it would get contracted, to the time that the design would be complete, would be about that time frame. Estimated begin construction would be the earliest of 2029, and then estimated end of construction, it would take at least 2 years to implement the whole array of improvements that are being proposed. Recommended next steps for each of the communities is, once again, just looking at the project phasing, make sure it makes sense with your community. Identifying any methodology changes for cost splits, budget years for design and construction, community cost splits for both the design construction as well as any sort of strategies for funding applications, strategies for engaging philanthropic organizations that would pay for a portion of the municipality share. And then just, of course, maintaining relations with the property owners. As I indicated, they're willing to work with us. We have letters of intent. If that property changes hands, I think that it's going to be much more difficult to implement anything out in this area. In condemnation, because this is a trail project, is not going to be allowed by any of the municipalities. So either you have a willing property owner that's willing to work with you, or you fall flat in terms of the ability to get it done. And then once again, ongoing maintenance is going to be something that's going to have to be agreed upon between the municipalities on who's maintaining the bridge and how that ongoing cost is going to be distributed. Memorandum of understanding between the communities should be prepared, and then any grant funding applications would be dependent on how the communities want to pursue on this. Next slide, TJ. Possible sources, we mentioned TAP. Andrew Lynch has been an integral part of this. He said that possibly STP urban transportation funding could be a source for this. There's the recreational trails program, the Knowles Nelson stewardship program, private funding, local municipal and TID funding, if you have any TIDs that would be supportive of this type of improvement. Next slide, TJ. So with that, I'll entertain any questions or thoughts that you have regarding the project.
All right, thank you. Questions, thoughts, comments? Alder Martins?
I'll start this off, I guess. Number one, because this project falls square into my district. I'm intimately familiar with these routes you're talking about, being a bicyclist, so I know the importance about getting bicycle traffic off of Grand Avenue, but also creating routes that give people, give cyclists reasons to go places or connect things, so that cycling is not only a recreational sport, but also a utilitarian a driver too. So I really love the idea of connecting East Kent Street all the way through the Eau Claire, or the bottoms there of the Eau Claire River down to Grossman, also extending the trail along Northwestern Avenue, because you are absolutely correct, that hill is a pinch point on Northwestern Avenue. So leading that as an alternative is a good thing. A couple questions though is that, so in alternative one, you've got box culverts on both the north and the south side of the railroad trestle. And is that south box culvert then, is that then just to give the city of Schofield opportunity for future development along the trail?
That is correct. They're looking for improving recreational access along that stretch of the river, whether it's canoe, kayak, or just access to public lands with, because right now anybody who goes underneath there is technically trespassing, and the railroad doesn't appreciate, people just nonchalantly walking underneath their railroad
Yep.
truss right
No,
now.
I
So
get that. And I suppose putting both culverts in at the same time is going to be a lot cheaper than coming back.
Correct.
Yeah, even though one of them is going to be a dead end in the short term. And is there any, this is a really long route. Are there like stops or waypoints along the routes, where people can enjoy the view, the scenery there? Or is that something that's not really thought of yet at this point in time?
that one's open for discussion or development. I think from a DOT or transportation perspective, they're not worried about waypoints and viewing stops at this stage. I think they're just more or less looking at feasibility. One thing that I forgot to mention was the cost for the no build. So the DOT puts a value of life at $10 million per fatality. And so if you're just looking at the number of fatalities on Business 51 already that were bike or pedestrian related, that's $20 million just in the last 10 years, just on the value of life. And that's why they're so interested in this study, is because we're starting to get to a point where, life is, becoming more valuable than the improvements that it would take to do it.
Oh,
So
yeah, absolutely. And finally, then, you brought up lighting, and I know that's probably way too soon to talk about lighting, but one of my concerns I understand the safety aspect of lighting, but one of my concerns is that you start lighting this trail, it's gonna, like you said, it's gonna affect wildlife, but also I do have concerns about maintaining, outside of the city limits, trying to maintain sort of a dark skies kind of exposure. So what would really please me if there was some kind of, if lighting did come into play, if it was something that, either had, primary downward throw but also a color temperature that was more acceptable to, to maintaining a dark sky and for wildlife. So. All right, I guess that's all I got at this point. Thank you. I really enjoyed this presentation, so thanks for bringing it to us today.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Alder Neal.
Just one question about the box culverts. So what keeps them passable in terms of incursion of water, from heavy rain or that kind of thing? Are they drained out, or what makes them passable?
There would be a sloped side to them. There'd also be slightly above the floodplain when we set the elevation. So there'd be the 100-year floodplain, and these culverts would have, a slight grade to them to just get water to drain out if it went higher than the 100-year floodplain.
So the tracks are already above that, enough above the floodplain?
Correct. We have some space within the truss there. Watco agreed that they would re-engineer their truss with a stronger moment arm and get rid of diagonal brace, because they just redid some of their bridge work here in the last 2 years and just did a project out there to improve their foundations at the abutments of that bridge.
And the railroad is still, as usual, I guess, adamant about not wanting crossings.
They're willing to work with us on this crossing because it's not a direct crossing of the track. It's underneath their track.
Well, no, I'm talking about on track level.
On the track level, yes, that would be trespassing to go on the track level. And they do catch people, crossing across the top of that structure currently, and even jumping off of it, so.
Thank you.
Alan, go ahead.
Sure, I had a question on your cost breakdown here and how you came up with that, I guess, or if you could delve into that a little bit more. I see, when you look at the construction costs, and then when you see your engineering administrative is almost double of what the actual cost of the project is. And then how you arrived at the city of Wausau at 60.6% cost share. When you look at construction's about 3.5 million and your contingency is like 5 million. I guess I was just, how did you come up with that? The city of Wausau would be $5 million in contingencies and the other two would be 1.2 and 1.9. What kind of formula did you use there?
So that's all broken out in the detailed estimate that I could provide to you, Alan, I guess to give you the summary of how all those numbers added up in the spreadsheet. This is a summary spreadsheet, so I have a greater, I guess, itemized spreadsheet that shows alternative 1, 2 broken down more.
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious in that because it looks like, our construction cost is not that much more above the other communities, but yeah, we end up paying 60.6% of the project. It seems, I don't know, I guess I'd like to see how those numbers fare out a little bit more.
Yep, I can provide that to you. There'll be, like I said, the full detailed report, and that's going to be another discussion for the communities if there's a change in the split that is proposed, or if that's something that what the split I have is adequate. So.
Okay.
I'll follow up with you on that.
All right. I'd just like to say I bike a lot, so I hate going down Grand Avenue, so anything to get over there would be better. I got a public comment.
It's just a question. Have you done this evaluation anywhere else in Wisconsin for another similar project?
Yeah, we do bridge.
Can it just answer it into the mic so that
Yeah,
they can get there?
We do bridge feasibility studies for other communities in the state, so this is not the only one that we've put
And
together.
how did the amount that you projected for those projects come out compared to what the spreadsheet says initially when you made the presentation on those?
Every site situation is way different. I can't tell you that from a comparable standpoint that the other span bridges, this is certainly a longer span bridge than most bridges we're coming across. A lot of the feasibility studies are 100-foot span or less for crossing. This is certainly a longer one.
But how, on those particular projects, if you predicted it was going to be $4 million, was the actual final cost in that same, or like many projects, we have an overrun of another $2.5 million?
I would say our costs are based on the current bid average in that they're comparable. I guess I can't think of a specific instance right now where we were off on our estimate,
Right, thanks.
higher or lower.
Okay.
All right, thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
guys. Yep. And we'll move on to agenda item number 3, update on construction of lead service line replacements. Eric, if you want to just kind of give us a number of where you're at.
Sure. Thank you for having me today so I could present to you all an update. So efforts continue. We have currently replaced about 257 service lines. The goal for this first year is 553. So we have identified 545. So not quite that 553, but we're still canvassing and still working to find the rest there. We are getting back consent forms and ROE forms, so that number is climbing as well. So we're at 505 consent forms returned. So again, getting closer to that 553. As far as canvassing efforts go, so we're continuing to knock on doors, try to find those unverified homes and get inside and figure out whether or not it's lead so that we can schedule them for replacements. Next week, 5 Star Energy Services, who's the primary contractor doing the replacements, they plan on bringing in another crew as well as some administrative support so that we can really achieve our goal here in what's pretty much a crunch time. We've only got about a month and a half until our deadline of October 15. So, there are going to be some long days ahead. We are pretty much on schedule for the most part. We're currently working in East GD Jones and West GD Jones, although I think that's probably a bad name for that neighborhood. I think we're more in Worley Park, actually. So those are our areas right now. We'll also be along 1st and 3rd Avenue. We're doing a couple there tomorrow. We do have flaggers for that area. It's a really busy street, so we're aware of that and plan to take safety seriously there. So that's where we're at. We do have a bi-monthly newsletter that just came out. And then in terms of kind of the canvassing efforts, we're also sending out letters to the unverified homes. We've also been leaving door stickers as kind of a last chance on some of those unverified homes as we're going around and knocking on doors again. So, you know, that effort continues. We're really trying to bolster our numbers so that we can reach our goal for the year. We are also attending events at Community Partners Campus. They have a food bank, and we're kind of setting up a table during that time so that as residents come in, we can talk to them about, you know, their service line, whether or not it's been verified yet. It's also a great opportunity for LIUNA, who's one of our partners here, the labor union, to try to, you know, employ some Wausau residents and drum up interest there as well. That's my update. Any questions?
My only thought is, I know we're going to be talking about next year's coming up here shortly in finance and budget. It might be a good time to get you in front of the full council and just give an update. If we can try and get that in September, I think it would be a good idea.
Yeah, we'll try to work with you guys on probably the best time for that, you know, probably after our funding source and stuff comes out from the DNR, so we'll work with them on that. Yeah, sounds good.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to pull agenda item number 4, correct? That's got to go back, okay. And we'll move on to agenda item number 5, discussion and possible action on state municipal agreement for North 3rd Avenue, West Union Avenue to West Bridge Street. Alan, what's your name?
Yes, so when we were out looking at streets and for concrete pavement rehab, staff noticed that this section of street was significantly decayed for the age of it. So we got the DOT involved because it is Business 51. We met with the DOT and their pavement engineers and actually did some cores out there. And they found that the pavement was exhibiting what's called ASR, which is a form alkali silica reaction that degrades the concrete faster. So they've agreed to replace that section of roadway. Since it is Business 51, they are 100% responsible for the reconstruction. So this is a good step because we maintain that road and it's pretty unmaintainable right now. So the fact that the DOT recognizes that it is a construction, you know, a problem, then they're going to replace it. That's a good step forward for us. So I'd recommend we approve it.
All right, thank you. Any discussion?
Move to approve.
Alder Neal, got a motion to approve. I guess second from Alder Watson. Any further discussion? All those in favor can say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed, and that passes. And we'll move on to agenda item number 7, discussion and possible action on closing 28th Avenue between Madonna Drive and West Wausau Avenue. And Alan, you want to start this? Or
Sure. You can. We included some maps in here. So right now, the road is closed basically from Marianne Lane on the north end and Maple Creek Drive on the south end. There are road closure notifications and detours posted at West Wausau Avenue and also at Madonna Drive. There has been, in talking with Alder Hankey, maybe moving that detour down to Madonna Drive instead of Maple Creek. I think there is some, you know, if that's the ultimate route that we're going to consider, I think there is some consideration that should be given to that. Madonna Drive is a little bit, you know, it brings people all the way down to 32nd Avenue, which 32nd Avenue is reconstructed. It's in better shape. The issue going up Maple Creek right now is people are going up 29th or 30th, which is not in the greatest condition. So, and
I'll add on, I've gotten a lot of comments from people on Maple Creek and 29th that the road's deteriorating and they don't like the excess traffic there. And it just makes sense that people are taking that as the shortest route right now. Where I think if we move the closure down to Madonna, it'll give us a good test run of what the future of what option 2 of the future would look like. I think this was a good test run of what option 1 would look like. And then I'd just like to add, I put an article into the newsletter through the city, hopefully to kind of lay this out and just to mention that we'll probably be discussing this at every meeting going forward and taking any public input. And then I did volunteer the Worley Park group to do a presentation in December during our meeting. So any help you guys can help me out getting letters out, that would be awesome. We could talk after though. So do we need a motion to move the closure down one more block? Or can we do a consensus recommendation or?
Yeah, I think a consensus would be fine, or a motion, just that there's support from this committee, so that engineering isn't moving forward, or Public Works isn't moving forward with something that this committee doesn't agree with. I guess we're looking for that support, and like you said, Alder Henke, there will be that letter coming out, or in the newsletter, and I also think that if we do move it down, I have committed, and Lori and I will get a letter out. And we're trying to decide the area, but I think at least in this general neighborhood, we'll send a letter out within the next couple weeks here, just to also let people know. So I think between the newsletter article and what we mail out to the area, I think people should be pretty well informed at that point.
Okay. Alder Larson?
I just have a question. I'm assuming that the neighborhood is pretty well acclimated that the road is already closed and using their alternate routes and stuff. And you know, I'm concerned if this is going to upset the apple cart as such, or you know, make it more of an inconvenience. I know it's a matter of what, 100 feet maybe, you know, so.
I'm just going off of what residents in the area have told me. And even though the detour signs say go to 32nd Avenue, a lot of people are still using 29th and then cutting down Maple Creek Drive. And neither of those roads are in the greatest condition.
Right.
Where 32nd is better.
Yeah, I've been up in that neighborhood, and well, then I'll make the motion to accept item number 7 and let the engineering department move ahead move forward with this project.
Okay. So closing Maple Creek
Yes.
from 29th to 28th.
Yes.
All right. Motion from Larson, second from Neal. Any further discussion? Martins?
I just got one quick question, and it appears on the map that this is not the case, but moving the road closure south one more block to Madonna Street, that's not going to affect any businesses or any of the properties. It didn't appear that. I think there's that counseling center there, but it looks like they don't have any access on the 28th.
Correct. They're, right. So there wouldn't, the access to the businesses and all that come off of Madonna or off of, so there's really no driveways.
So there is no impact.
There's no driveways off of 28th Avenue between Maple Creek and Madonna. So there really isn't an impact, other than that people are going to have to get off a little earlier. So I think, you know, and Maple Creek Drive, we're actually going to have to close it at 29th, or just beyond that driveway, so people aren't going down that.
And then getting stuck and having to turn
Stuck in
around.
no man land. Yeah.
And
So
that's not gonna, that looks like there's, you know, Aspirus has got a property and then there's a homeowner there, but I don't think that's gonna affect the homeowner, so, okay.
no, we would obviously leave it open for that
Yep.
for that homeowner.
Yep.
But, you know, and Madonna is a more level route, I should say, than Maple Creek, and it's also in better shape because we did overlay Madonna. And Madonna is a city street, whereas, you know, to more credence to closing it there, Maple Creek Drive, the majority of that is in the town, so.
All right. I have a motion from Larson, second from Neal. Any further discussion? See none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, and that passes. And I jumped all around, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're done. So I'll take a motion to adjourn. Alder Watson, second by Larson. All those in favor, say aye. All right, we stand adjourned.